So we have, my friends, and we have the Iowa caucuses starting tonight. And by the way, if you don't know how these Iowa caucuses work, it is just truly, it's almost entertainment. It's a, you know, I will tell you, here in the great state of Texas, where I live, I've been an election judge, I've been a poll watcher, I know all the rules. You cannot even enter on primary voting day or in the general election. You can't walk in with a T-shirt on or a hat or anything with a political message. You can't walk in to the polling area where everyone goes to vote with a T-shirt that says, you know, Trump 2020 or, keep America great. You can't do that. You cannot, inside the polling area, you can't engage in politics. In Iowa, it's a whole different thing in the Iowa caucuses. So basically tonight in Iowa, starting at 7 p.m. Iowa time, which is Central Time, people gather in their precincts and they have caucuses. So people gather and they talk. I mean, there's an open engagement in the political bantering. Yeah, I'm for Klobuchar. No, I'm for Sanders. I'm for Biden. They talk about it. Then they get people divided up in groups by signs. So someone who likes Bernie Sanders will be standing by a Bernie Sanders sign, and he's got his little crowd around him. All the other candidates in the Democrat presidential primary have their candidates, their sign, and their supporters around their candidate's name. And then whoever has, I think it's 15%, if you don't make at least 15% of the people in the room, then you're out. And then the other people who are supporting whatever candidate they had will try to pluck away the supporters of the candidate who didn't get the 15% cut. So Iowa caucus is very bizarre, goes late night. We'll find out tomorrow what happens in the Iowa caucuses, but I will say this. In 5 of the last presidential races in this country, the person that won the Iowa caucus on the Democrat side won the presidency, or excuse me, won the nomination. So you might think Iowa is a little obscure, relatively small state, but the consequence, and it is in part a test of where the people really are outside of polling, you know, where they're really thinking, but it's also really, it has an amazing power within the media if they like the candidate who won in the Iowa caucus to say, well, yeah, obviously, you know, so-and-so is our clear winner, look at this, you know, this person won. Well, there is panic in the Democrat Party, nothing short of pure panic about the idea that Bernie Sanders appears to be headed for easily winning the Iowa caucus. And I got to tell you, folks, I find it, I mean, it is amazing in this era in 2020 when our entire country's been watching the tremendous poverty of Venezuela, the militant communism of Cuba, and how you the suffering in China under communism, that a Democrat socialist in this country could get even close to the Democrat nomination for president. This is why the DNC is in such a panic. So I want to just share a few things about what the DNC is doing about this. They're not taking this campaign sitting down. They are putting money in, and they're putting all sorts of twists in the Democrat primary to get to the point of trying to force Bernie Sanders out. We're going to talk in the next segment about how really communist Bernie Sanders is, but right now I just want to talk what's happening in Iowa within the Democrat Party. Number one, they have 2 mega billionaires running in this primary, one being Bloomberg, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and the other being Tom Steyer, who's this guy who made his billions being a developing, using coal, using natural gas, using the fossil fuels that he now so despises. So he made his money on that. He could just send it in if he feels so guilty, but instead he's running on some radical leftist environmental thing. But understand how much money these people have spent. Former New York City Mayor Bloomberg and businessman Steyer, in the last quarter of 2019, just the last quarter, 3 months, 1/4 of 2019, spent a combined $340 million. $340 million, more than any of the other campaigns have in total on the Democrat side. They spent that, and so they're out there basically. They're also, another factoid, the billionaire candidates competing in this thing also gave their own campaigns so they can contribute to their own campaigns. The federal campaign finance limitations do not apply to people donating to their own campaigns. They have donated to their own campaigns, just Steyer and Bloomberg, $355 million. So they have spent $340 million on ads. They have donated to themselves $355 million, and they are just on a quest, and it's becoming clearer and clearer what their quest is. Steyer, I don't think, really thinks he could win the nomination. I think he knows he couldn't win the nomination. So he's not really thinking, I'm going to keep on putting money in and man, I'll probably win. He is trying to take the wind out of Bernie Sanders' sails, he and Bloomberg. But I want to tell you an interesting theory that was floated by Steve Bannon, who's he was briefly with the Trump campaign. He's a Trump advisor, or maybe on the edges of a Trump advisor. But he was interviewed over the weekend. And what his thought is, and I think this is really interesting, and I actually think it's very, very likely to be accurate. His thought is that Michael Bloomberg has absolutely no reason to think he could win, does not think he could win the Democrat nomination for president. But he's pouring, he's a billionaire times many. He's pouring in money because he wants to come to be in control of the Democrat National Committee and of the nomination process. He wants to kind of replace Hillary and Bill, who used to run it. He wants to be the one. He's running now, he thinks, the Democrat Party. He wants to force out Bernie Sanders, who he realizes America's not going to elect. So he wants to force Sanders out. And so he's really spending money to gain control of the Democrat Party and spending his money strategically so he can get people who are the powers that be inside the DNC to defer to him. But this guy, Bloomberg, so wants Bernie Sanders out that what Bannon is floating the idea of is, no one of these cast of characters, this clown car of the Democrat candidates for president, for the nomination for presidency on the Democrat side, none of them are going to burst free like they often have. Well, the March primaries came along and so emerged, and he's the big leader, she's the big leader. He's saying that's not going to happen. America doesn't like any of their choices on the left. Even the people getting behind Biden on the Democrat side, the polling that shows Biden, leaving Iowa out of it, where Bernie is ahead, Biden is popular in many states or viewed polls as the most popular candidate. Even he, Bloomberg thinks, is a joke of a candidate. He thinks that people are choosing Biden because everybody else on the Democrat lineup are so crazy, so radical leftist. Biden at least appears to not be a communist or not a socialist. But this theory of Bannon is that Bloomberg is going to spend all this money to gain control of the DNC and get to the convention. No winner will emerge on the first, when they do the first ballot, because they have all the delegates there in one room and they're sitting there in Milwaukee and they got to choose their candidate. He says no one's going to emerge as the winner of the Democrat primary. And so he, Bloomberg, wants to be in position, controlling with his money, saying, you got to put Hillary Clinton in. And I got to tell you, Hillary wants to run. She's chomping at the bit. She's blathering about it. She wants to run. So this is Bloomberg thinks going to happen, that all this money, Bannon thinks is going to happen, that Bloomberg is spending this money, get to the convention, and going to force them to agree that Hillary is a candidate. I do want to tell you a couple of the interesting things about what's happening inside the DNC. They are panicked about the rise in popularity of Sanders, because even though with the millennials and young people, who are saying, yeah, everything for free, they're kind of like the New York subway protesters, only everything, my health care, my education, my housing, everything should be free. And this is, dangerous, obviously, because there are still enough Americans who realize that is not a viable plan. But the Democrats getting nervous, you may have known, but last time in 2016, when you had the Democrat primary came down essentially to Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, that there were allegations. In fact, they weren't just allegations. What emerged was inside the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was orchestrating things to be sure that Hillary won the nomination and Bernie Sanders was pushed out. This is what the DNC did in 2016. And after that was exposed and all the mea culpas, we're so sorry, we shouldn't have done that, they changed some of the rules that relate to the Democrat convention. So coming up in 2020, one rule they had changed after the outcry of unfairness and protests against the 2016 election, where the Democrats just orchestrated Hillary into the nomination, they said, okay, on the first ballot, when all these delegates from all 50 states show up, when we get to that ballot, the superdelegates cannot vote. Superdelegates, if you don't know that term, on the Democrat side means there are people who were not chosen as delegates within the process within individual states. People can be, people are delegates from every state and they're chosen through a process. Every state has their own. But delegates get there and there are people saying, yeah, I'm a delegate to the Democrat convention from Wisconsin, Oklahoma, wherever it is. But the Democrats also have always had, because they all are forever and always the party about controlling the people, not really listening to the people, seizing that upper echelon elite ruling class to really be in charge. They had a superdelegate process, and superdelegates are appointed by the powers that be inside the Democrat Party. They're members of Congress. They are appointed by the DNC. These are people not chosen by the voters. These are people appointed by the party. So in 2016, they said, okay, during the first ballot, superdelegates cannot vote. To really have that first ballot be a measure of what the people wanted. Well, now that they're so worried about Bernie Sanders, as well they should be, because you're that worried about him, there's now rumblings inside the DNC of people saying, we might have to change our mind about that. Never mind about this idea that we're going to let the people actually choose the candidate. They're talking about dropping the rule that precludes superdelegates from voting on the first ballot. And of course, the Bernie Sanders people are very, very unhappy about this. They just think they saw the superdelegates as their enemy in 2016, the ones who could see that he's crazy and they don't want him to be president. And so they worry about these superdelegates getting the vote again, no matter how well Bernie Sanders does. Now, to be really clear, Joe Biden is ahead of Bernie Sanders in a lot of states and in the overall national poll. But there's a lot of concern about Joe Biden, about what came to light with him with respect to the Ukraine, about what seems to be his diminished capacity to speak well in public, getting confused regularly, not really sure what's happening, what state he's in, when he was, a lot of confusion. I never want to taunt that because I don't want people to suffer mental decline. I don't want to mock him, but he has no business running for president. And many people can see this about him. And so they're waiting for that to sink in to the Democrat voters. And back to Bloomberg, this is what he's worried about, is all the allegedly mainstream moderate Democrat voters, and there are millions of those. There are Democrat voters who want nothing to do with Bernie Sanders socialism, want nothing to do with Elizabeth Warren and her crazy policies. They're just kind of long-term Democrats who've always voted Democrat because they think it's the party that's nice to poor people or something, or the little guy's party. And those Democrat voters have been clinging to Biden as a voice of sanity among the candidates on the Democrat side. And yet they're starting to worry maybe he really isn't that sane after all. This is so Bloomberg's saying, once people get really worried about Biden and don't want to support him, and they don't want to have the what you have all seen of the Bernie Sanders fiery leftism, socialism, that they're going to be floundering. And Bloomberg wants to, kind of scoot in, save them all, and say, hey, how about Hillary? She's our gal. One other thing I want to mention, and actually, to be clear, Bernie Sanders' campaign is already openly complaining about this, about somehow the Democrats are orchestrating things again, changing the rules. There was a poll, CNN had done a poll that was to be released yesterday. As I say, the caucus is tonight at 7 p.m. So this poll was to be released yesterday, which apparently showed very good results for Bernie Sanders, again, in the Iowa caucus. And I want to mention one other thing about the Iowa thing before you change subjects, but CNN pulled the poll. They refused to release it. The reason they gave for refusing to release it was that the Buttigieg campaign, the mayor's, the Democrat presidential candidate who is a mayor from South Bend, has said that this poll was in some way unfair to him because I think at least one version explained it as there was one poll question which failed to include his name. Whether it was unintentional, I don't know. But he's saying bad poll because I was left out of a question, shouldn't be honored. But so agree. I'll tell you the big thing on the left, which I do like, and I will hearken back to the Sanders campaign. The Sanders campaign. We played on this show last week the clip of a young man, Kyle Jurek, who is on the Bernie Sanders campaign. He's in Iowa, and he was the one threatening that if Bernie doesn't win the nomination on the first ballot at the Milwaukee convention, Milwaukee will burn. This time, violence against the police. Police will be the victims of our violence. America will burn. He's the same one who said Americans who won't go along with Bernie Sanders' radical socialism should be sent to concentration camps to get their head right. That mentality is not just one loopy guy on the Bernie Sanders campaign. Lots of reports talking about the Bernie Sanders campaign filled with Antifa type thinkers, filled with radical leftists, with genuine communists, with people who say, I'm just humoring Bernie Sanders by his democratic socialism thing. You know, I'm a socialist. I'm a communist. These people are not only large in numbers in the Bernie Sanders campaign, they are vocal, they are strident. So picture yourself at a little Iowa caucus, like I was talking about in the start of this segment. Little Iowa caucus, you know, grandma and her 3 kids come in, or whoever it is, and they show up, and they always like Joe Biden or, you know, Klobuchar, or whoever they like. And you have this rabid mob of Bernie Sanders supporters who have no tolerance for any other candidate, no tolerance for freedom or capitalism or free markets. And those people are confrontational, they are belligerent, they are demanding, and they're scary. Those people inside every caucus meeting in Iowa tonight. This is among the other reasons that people in the Democrat Party are getting alarmed. Bernie has radicalized. I'm not saying he did it alone. Bernie has radicalized many young people in this country to think the answer to every problem that some young person has. I can't afford to buy my subway fare. I can't afford to, finish my college education. I can't afford to pay back my loans. I can't afford to buy health insurance. The answer of Bernie Sanders is always, the reason you can't afford it is because you're a victim, because capitalism is evil, because freedom is evil. Vote for me. I will take away the money from rich people. I'll pay for everything you need. Arguments that should have failed, would have failed, had America done a better job educating our young people, starting in kindergarten, to get around to remembering there truly really is no such thing as a free lunch. Socialism has failed everywhere it's tried. Communism creates misery. And yet Bernie Sanders, along with other left-wingers in academia and politics, has instilled a significant portion of the voting base in this country to believe they're entitled, if they just could get the right guy in the White House, everything would be paid for. No more problems, everything be free. And so now we're facing, tonight in the Iowa caucus, this is kind of the first step in this primary process. We're facing the culmination of the problem that in America, we have not stood up to the socialism that has filled academia from about kindergarten through high school and in college. We haven't stood up to it. We haven't challenged it. We haven't fought it. We have not had enough voices, for the Democrat Party in this country to say, well, we're not really, that's just Bernie. He's kind of over there. We're just very moderate, Democrats. No, the Democrat Party, including Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all of the leaders of the DNC, they do not get a break from the radicalism of Bernie Sanders and the danger he has put this country in by convincing millions of young, ignorant people that they're entitled to have everything for free. Those Democrat Party leaders, they get no break. They have no excuse for saying, well, we didn't really think Bernie Sanders was going to get anywhere, so we let him talk that way. They have cultivated and enabled the Bernie Sanders base of power to grow because they never stand up and say, Bernie, no. Even when the squad became members of Congress, AOC and the other 3 first-term Democrat members of the U.S. House, they are radical, they are leftists, and there is barely a peep out of the Democrat Party leadership talking about how radical and dangerous these ladies are. So in closing this segment, I want to just say, we're watching the Iowa caucus tonight. We're going to watch and see whether any rationality remains, at least in the state of Iowa, among the Democrat voting base, or has Bernie Sanders' campaign, which regularly describes itself as a revolution, as a strong socialist campaign, has that campaign overwhelmed, mom and dad, everyday Democrat voter in Iowa, to the point that they actually think voting for Bernie Sanders, voting for socialism in America, is a viable and reasonable path forward? We'll have a lot to talk about that tomorrow.